Welcome to Information Week. I'm Senior Editor Jean-Pierre Ruth, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Alex Lintner, CEO of Experian Software and Technology, where we're going to take a look at some of the transformation efforts that Experian has looked at and explored, particularly what they've considered and started to put to work when it comes to making use of AI, which of course every organization is looking at different ways they might apply AI. But today we're going to get a special look at some of the things that Alex and his team have been working on and kind of putting to the test with Experian. So Alex, thank you so much for making yourself available and taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, JP, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Well, first, let's talk about what were some of the considerations. Experian. I think we all know Experian from a particular broad sense, but let's talk about some of the the perspectives of what Experian wanted to do with itself when it comes to technology, and then we can speak to how AI in particular started to be something you were considering in terms of kind of furthering transformation efforts.
Yeah, very good. Maybe, JP, it's helpful to the listeners to just get a feel of who Experian is. I know everybody knows us as a credit bureau, but I joined 10 years ago now, and the company has changed dramatically during that time. One data point to describe that is 35% of our global revenue now comes from software and software platforms. And so that makes the question of Gen AI and what it can do for us very relevant in two ways. There is, of course, the question of how can it help us gain productivity internally. We have 23,000 employees, 11,500, so 50% of our employees are developers. And on the other side, of course, it's also functionality that we want to build into our products for clients. And when I think about the second first, then you got to think about Experian as a company that has a vast repository of data in a safe environment, a safe infrastructure. That data used to be on disparate network servers, and it's now centralized and scaled on the cloud, which on one hand dramatically increases the efficiency for our clients to access and use it. But on the other hand, it makes available all these Gen AI tools that we all hear and read about. We started introducing Gen AI in the form of sort of assistive chatbots, I'm going to call it that, and I'm trying to sort of use those words carefully in making clear there was a basic step from our perspective.
Sure.
And it was there for customer support. And the trick for us is it needs to integrate the functionality, the function of the software with the access to the data. Sort of specifically the platform that we have integrated it the most is what we call our Ascend platform, which has already, prior to Gen AI, sort of redefined how data analysis is done through a cloud-hosted environment by allowing seamless model development. Because one of our largest customer segments is financial institutions, not the only one, but it is certainly the largest one if we look at us worldwide. And what they do is they need to nowadays decide on 40% of all credit applications within milliseconds because people submit them online. They don't go into the branch anymore and speak to a branch manager. They do it online. The way that can be done in milliseconds is they have a model, sort of a credit model that defines their attributes, they call it features of what does a customer look like that we would extend credit to. And for the listeners who is mostly a technical audience, let me define credit in a very simple way. Credit is somebody sends you money against the promise that you're going to pay it back with some interest. So once you send the money, you are holding the risk, because the person who you extended credit to can stop paying back the loan at any time, and then you go through a collections process, and it becomes loan losses potentially, which is exactly what the financial institution wants to avoid. So the models are developed by a department in the bank that's usually called data analytics. And these people, think of them as PhDs in math or physics, and they then look at the data and say, well, how many customers do we have of this type, and what type of loans do they need, and what's the risk with that type of customers? And then they define all of that in this model. That analytics team then sends on what they have defined to the IT department. And the IT department needs to normally recode the language, because the analytics people, they wrote that in a coding language that is not what the software is written in that the bank has in their system. And so then a process endures of that happening, and then it's put into production. Putting in production means it's now online and it works. And then the regulator comes in, and the regulator says you have to actually file what your model allows. And then you have to measure whether the model performs as you have predicted. And there is something called model drift. So the model departs from that, and then you have to adjust your variables so that it performs as you have documented for the regulator. 3 separate departments do that: the analytics department, the IT department, and then the compliance department. Now, what we do is we have put that together that's why we call it a platform that connects these different departments at the financial institutions seamlessly. They can send on, we do the translation to coding language for them. We monitor the model drift. We automatically send them signals, and all of that is now supported with GenAI. What does that mean? That means that the model developer, when they develop the model, they can just now describe in the same language, JP, you and I would talk with each other. Here is what I want the model to do. And it recognizes the language, and it translates it into code. And then the model developer can test, well, does this look like I want it? There's a nice flow chart that is being shown visually. And when they're done, I have all my data elements in. I see how many customers I would address. I see what the GD score is, so the accuracy of the model, of the predictability. I pass that on. And when they pass it on, we automatically generate the code in the language that the bank needs to put it into production, so to put it online. And then we automatically have a sort of, call it the rec tech type of solution we would have called it in the past, regulatory technology solution that generates the report that the banks needs to file, showing what the model was supposed to do versus what it's actually doing, how many customers are admitted, how many are rejected, how much loan losses are occurred. And it creates a PDF file that can be printed out, but nobody does that anymore, but it could be printed out. And the PDF file can then be submitted to the regulators. Of course, every step requires human intervention, so we don't go all the way to automation. Mm-hmm. And at those steps, then the person in the 3 departments that I just described, they can look at it. They need to say, okay, I've looked across it, it's okay, and then they pass sort of enter, if you will, in order to actually get it done. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do at Experian now.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a lot. There's a lot of great things to hear. If I want to speak to the compliance and regulatory aspect and get as much of you can share in terms of making use of AI and generative AI. Is this the generative AI? Is it homegrown or using third party? And just want to speak to that in relation to compliance, internal compliance and also the regulatory thing. Yeah. What kind of internal experience safeguards are you saying hey? Okay, we want this AI to understand and to be trained up to deliver what we're looking for, but also the concern that a lot of folks have of making sure that things don't get out into the wild, or the AI trains and learns something and then it's sharing it someplace where it doesn't need to be.
Yeah. It is the quintessential question when it comes to the use of Gen AI for Experian, because we are the 2nd largest data company in the world. And as such, we have a lot of data, and we sort of got whatever you want to call it, a bullseye on our back with bad actors, trying to get to that data. And if you use GenAI in the wrong way, you increase your risk. So we have decided we build our own LLMs and SLMs, small language models, in order to define how the model is trained based on our data, and only our systems have access to it, rather than using a publicly available system and then tweaking that and having all the risks that come with that. So we veered on the safe side, if that's a fair summary for that. It is all about access rights to the data. You obviously know how GenAI works. It puts its feeler out, and then it puts a little note on the drawer and says this data is here, and then depending on the question it asks, it goes to the right drawers, finds access to the data, and then gives you back a response. Mm-hmm. So we have kept all of that in-house. We did not want to expose any of it to the sort of public LLMs. In the beginning, if I were to now go back, whatever it is, 18 months, 2 years that we started working with this stuff, of course, we used the LLMs that were accessible because we needed to learn. We didn't know how it works. We knew, as the rest of the world, if they're brave enough to admit it, we knew very little, and we needed to learn. But beam forward 18 or 24 months, what I'm describing is the state today.
Gotcha. Appreciate thoughts on that. So it seemed like you very clear with like okay, there are going to be you said there are going to be guardrails on this. There's going to be lines that the AI is not going to be allowed to cross in terms of like, okay, it can get access to this, but there's the data or resources that it just I guess should not be touching, or at least unsupervised access to certain things.
That's right. I mean, you got to think of it as a model. A model is already, so even before GenAI, it's only allowed to be built on the basis of what's called depersonalized data. So JP, you have a unique name. I have a unique name. So we're not the problem. But if your name is Jeff Miller or Chris, name another common last name, Matthews, there is going to be 20,000 of you in North America, and even in your town, because we could use the address as sort of a limiting factor. There may be a couple of those if you live in an urban environment, and the personalization has been protected for a long time by the regulator by saying models cannot be built using actual consumer data that is personalized. So the name comes off. It's depersonalized data, where only the attributes that show the financial behavior of the consumer is still disclosed. So it would show, for example, if I think about myself, it would show I have a mortgage. It would show when the mortgage started, how much my home was at the initial purchase price, how much I've paid off. It would show I had a car loan. It would show I have 3 credit cards, and so on. And it would show, am I regularly paying back or not? It would, disclose the information about how I behave as a financial consumer, but it wouldn't say, this is Alex Lintner living in Colorado. It would leave that. It would leave that off already. And then the GenAI safeguards are on top of what the regulator had already in place even before then.
Gotcha. So what are some of the barometers or ways that you've been kind of gauging how successful or that the AI has been delivering what you're hoping for, or maybe even exceeding expectations? What kind of way have you kind of gauged it's the way it's performed, and then kind of assess okay, now we'd like to see it do this?
Well, we do it the same way that Apple or Microsoft does. Everybody looks at does it improve the customer experience, and does it save time and resources? That's sort of nomenclature in the tech industry of what you look at. So we look at very specifically, can our customers now interact with financial data in a conversational way, thereby making complex analytics more accessible? And we look at, does it save time and resources? And we have that measured by a third-party consultancy that then talks to customers without us being there, so they can say what they want and don't say what we want to hear. And they then do that with a large number of customers and then play the data back to us. That's sort of how we do it. And that's the customer-facing side. We haven't talked about the internal-facing side, which would, of course, be the same thing as it is for everybody. We want to slash model development times if we do it ourselves, or for our customers from what is today months, JP, in most cases, to in days, and in some cases we even have it to be hours if it's a simple model. We can slash it down to hours. So that's the success. And Forrester, who is this consultancy that I've referred to, who talks to the clients, they then go and measure how much it helps financial institutions improve fraud and credit decisioning, and they put a number against the return on investment and how quickly it will pay for itself. And that's how we measure success.
Gotcha. Talk about model development real quick. Have you gotten to the stage where you're making, a lot of folks are talking about, now AI is able to essentially, create itself to a certain point or certain aspect. Is that something you've looked at, looking towards, or are there other more important or more significant aspects of AI that you're looking towards to say, this is the next thing that we'd like to see happen or make use of with AI?
Well, the user interface will change, in our opinion. Mm-hmm. And the user interface will change in a way that you don't have to know anymore, what does your layout on your screen look like and which drawer do I go to in order to get certain functionality. But you can do what I just described in the context of model development. You can do that with AI in the future, where just ask a question and it goes to the right place in the application and basically gets you the answer and then puts you in that place in the application. So we are looking at that. We are looking at how can we make whatever you want to call it, the old landing page, so simple that a user just has to either type in or best using natural language, just say to the computer, I want to see all the models that are drifting, or I want to see all the models that are drifting more than 2.5%, or whatever they want to do. And then the application takes them there rather than having to navigate a traditional sort of menu on their screen. I think that's the next frontier with Gen AI, and in a complex, highly technical sort of set of tasks like the one that I've described at the beginning of the call. That's extremely helpful to the users, because all of the mundane task of logging in, going to the right place in the menu, going to the right place of the application, typing into your search, and then looking through all the models and filtering out the ones that have, it will save time. It will be convenient. It will feel app-less. I'm thinking about when you unpack an Apple product or start it, it's just so easy. They back then broke the barriers to that. I think this technology will break the barriers for all industries, financial services, where we are most active, included.
Gotcha. And one more question, just kind of round out our conversation up. Obviously, there are any number of sky is falling concerns that folks have had about, making use of AI, agentic AI, different ways that it might go wrong, or more recently, so I was somebody having a conversation about AI, models of AI, like learning that it's going to be replaced by a newer model and then deciding that it doesn't like that and kind of going HAL 9000 from the movie 2001 and trying to preserve its existence. I don't know, haven't vetted that myself to see if that actually has happened, but, what are some of the kind of, matters when it comes to AI there to say like, hey, this is something that you kind of try to make sure you're paying attention to make sure that the AI, behaves. And and what are some of the specific things in Experian space that might not be the generic concerns about AI, but are really specific to Experian, making use of AI, but here are the things that we are continuing to put guardrails up for, at least watch for how it behaves.
Yeah, I do think Gen AI is not yet mature, and I think all of us need to be aware of the risks with this new technology, because it's new. And let me just say something about how new, I regard personal assessment, I regard it as the fourth technology revolution. So let's just remind ourselves of what were the first three. The first one was the invention of the computer. It changed everything. The second was the invention of the internet. It changed everything. And the third one was the invention of the smartphone. It changed everything. In a word, I believe this one will change everything. But each one of those three, I'm old enough to have lived through all this. I remember the risks that were called out, and they were real, and they were there. And we all needed to learn to mitigate those risks and then bring out the good in those three technologies. And arguably, with the smartphones, we're still working on that. With the other two, maybe we have better command of it. The specific risk that I see with Gen AI is a technology that sort of says it has to give an answer. And that can be a problem, especially for LLMs, large language models, because what's the definition of a large language model? It has access to a vast amount of information, and therefore it looks until it can give an answer. And that's how hallucinations come about, because it will look until it can give you an answer. And depending on how you phrase your question, it will give you an answer that sort of, feeds off how you phrased your question. And I think that's a flaw, because there should be an answer that is, I don't know, or I can't answer that question, or I don't have enough information to answer that question, or there is two ways of looking at this. And I haven't seen that sophistication in the LLMs reining themselves in and not giving an answer. Now, we are trying to mitigate that by, on purpose, sometimes putting in SLMs, smaller language model, taking away information and actually training the model to give some of those answers. Because life is not so simple that every question has one clear answer, especially because in Gen AI, the way you ask a question influences what answer you get. So, I gave you one safeguard that we use. We have decided to use more SLMs and less LLMs. But is that enough? Is there another answer, a better answer, a different answer, an additional answer? I can't sit here and tell you that I have concluded any one of those. Mm-hmm. I think we're all learning together. We're all in this journey together, and it is good to be prudent. It is good to be cautious, and we do that through governance, through access right limitations, through no full automation, always having a human still look at it. But this, like I said, it will change everything. And so we better continue learning, because we're just at the very beginning.
Gotcha. Well, here's continuing to look at, conscious movements towards change with AI. Alex, listen, you have been fantastic. Thank you so much for those look at what you've been working on, what Experian has been experiencing, and regarding with AI. You've been fantastic. Really appreciate your time today.
JP, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.